The original script of this video was about how PlayStation has always been ahead of Xbox. I spent the last 5 years pretty much exclusively playing Xbox and PC games, while occasionally playing the many heavy hitter Sony releases. And going into the script, I knew I was mostly going to write about the PlayStation 2, but like I said before, it's been about 5 years since I've seriously sat down and played anything besides Xbox or PC. So I went to my nearest retro gaming store and picked up a PlayStation 2 for an amazing deal. Apparently the previous owner never opened it, and since it was technically previously owned, I got the pre-owned deal. So I also picked up a couple games from my childhood and some I've always really wanted to play. But I remember one time I went to my grandma's house and my cousin had a copy of Metal Gear 2 Sons of Liberty, and on the back of the booklet there was an ad for Silent Hill 2. And I cannot for the life of you tell you why I was so interested in this game as a kid, but I think a lot of it has to do with the name. Still to this day, I think it's one of the most eerie sounding titles. But fast forward however many years to May 15th, 2019, just 1 week before my 18th birthday, which was a very scary one. I've pretty much had a different mindset and approach at life only until recently. Most things about the real world didn't scare me until now, most things I didn't even think about as a kid. I mean, my biggest fear as a kid was like the fucking boogeyman, and now I can't stop thinking about my role in society and if I'm ready to become this adult everyone thinks I'm ready to be. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that my fears have matured a lot since I was a kid. And if I had played Silent Hill 2 not even a year ago, I don't even think it would have nearly gotten under my skin like it did now. Every day I wasn't playing Silent Hill, I was thinking about where the story was heading, and every day after I finished it, I can't stop thinking about how impactful it was. Every time I think about Silent Hill 2, my emotions are completely overrun with every little detail in that game. It's a surreal experience I still get chills thinking about, and I knew after my first session with Silent Hill 2 that I would have to dedicate this video to the masterpiece itself. But something that always fascinated me was the production of the first 4 games. As a lot of you may already know, the first 4 games were made by Team Silent, a group of game designers who failed on previous projects over at Konami, and were given the chance to make the closest thing to Resident Evil, as Konami was trying to cash in on the survival horror genre without wasting, in their eyes, their best game designers. Spoiler, in 1999 they made arguably the best survival horror game since Resident Evil, and in 2001 perfected the genre with Silent Hill 2, including mostly elements of psychological horror which they also perfected. But every little detail I learned about this game makes me love it even more. I mean, the fucking art director went out and took pictures of local shitty abandoned buildings and bathrooms so they could perfectly capture the eerie atmosphere of Silent Hill. They also built prop stages for the actors to perform every cutscene live. I mean, fuck, the amount of time and effort that went into this game is unimaginable. I suggest watching the 30-minute documentary of the making of Silent Hill that's on YouTube, but more importantly, I suggest checking out the game for yourself. But before I start spoiling the game, I want to talk about the music real quick. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I don't pay attention to most soundtracks in games. Most of them are pretty whatever. I mean, the best soundtrack in my opinion before playing Silent Hill 2 was the soundtrack to Minecraft, which I believe to be a fucking masterpiece, but nothing really taps into my emotions like the soundtrack of Silent Hill 2. The song Black Fairy that plays in the Lakeview Hotel still sends chills up my spine. The hotel is actually the last stretch of the game where all the secrets are revealed, and the guilt you feel with the hypnotic song in the background is an experience and fear I don't think any other form of media could replicate. This is truly a soundtrack to the scariest emotions you thought you never had, and I fucking love that. And unlike most soundtracks that are heavily reliant on the source material, the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack is enjoyable with or without the game. It's a soundtrack I've been frequently coming back to and probably will be for a good part of my life. To have a soundtrack that fits so perfectly in a game and just for casual listening is an insane accomplishment. Akira Yamaoka made a soundtrack that puts me in Silent Hill and taps into my emotions of that game every single time I listen to it, which is the highest compliment I can give for someone who I incredibly respect. But like I said earlier, I highly suggest checking out the game for yourself because I'm about to start spoiling stuff. Unfortunately, I know a lot of you aren't willing or going to experience the whole game, which I understand. Not a lot of people have a PlayStation 2 or a copy of the game lying around. I mean, you could play the HD versions, but that's basically a sin. But I highly suggest reconsidering continuing this video if you have yet to experience Silent Hill 2. For the people who decided to stay but haven't played the actual game, the story starts with our main man James Sunderland looking for his wife Mary in a town called Silent Hill. But the thing is, she's been dead for quite some time, and the only reason James is in Silent Hill is because of a letter he got from his wife, telling him to meet her in their special place, which is in Silent Hill. And if you ask anyone what the best part of the game is, they'll never tell you the combat or the puzzles. What makes this game a masterpiece is the story, the music, the atmosphere, and arguably the most important, the characters and monsters. Or more what they represent, as everyone, including the monsters, have a purpose besides continuing the story or making the game more difficult. For example, the Mannequin monster exists to remind James about his sexual urges and late wife who in her final hours, in his eyes, were just a pair of legs. The same goes for the bubblehead nurse, and their heads consistently convulse scene like they're trying to break free from being suffocated is a reminder to James and what he did to his wife. And arguably the most iconic monster, Pyramid Head, is there to punish James for what he's done. But the most interesting part is how the town manipulates itself for each character in the game. Eddie is a fucking psychopath who only sees people laughing and taunting him to do violent things to eventually be killed by James. Angela is a suicidal 19-year-old who killed her dad in self-defense after he sexually abused her, which the monster Abstract Daddy represents. She also only sees the town on fire just to be consumed by it towards the end of the game. Laura doesn't see any of the monsters due to her purity and innocence. And fun fact, Elle Holloway from Silent Hill Homecoming was supposed to be an older version of Laura, and she was actually going to be wearing James's jacket, implying that James adopted her like Mary always wanted to. But of course that idea was too good that Konami decided to scrap it during production. And James only sees the monsters you encounter during the game as well as Maria, essentially a hotter version of his wife Mary, who also shares the same memories as her and often uses that to fuck with James. She's also killed multiple times by Pyramid Head in front of James just to be brought back to life, further fucking with James. And Maria's only goal is to protect Laura and be accepted by James due to her only having the same memories as Mary. That kind of depth is something less than rare in the gaming industry, which is unfortunate because horror is probably my favorite genre in most media, yet horror is probably my least favorite in games. Due to almost all horror games, especially after 2010, being nothing but really just jump scare simulators. Arguably the biggest horror game being Five Nights at Freddy's, which is literally just checking cameras until a jump scare kills you. And I know MatPat is still milking that cow, but I don't really care how many game theories he makes on the series, it's barely a story comparable to the Silent Hill games made by Team Silent. But back to Silent Hill 2, the game has always stuck out of the series, being as far as I know the only game made by Team Silent not to include the cult story, which depresses me even more to learn that Team Silent was going to go back to psychological horror on the 5th game, before Team Silent was disbanded by Konami itself because they wanted Western developers to continue making the games, which, big spoiler, ended up killing the franchise to the point where Konami barely even acknowledged the series even exists. And funny enough, when Silent Hills, the remake by Kojima and Del Toro, was cancelled in 2015, I had no fucking idea why everyone was so mad. I also didn't get a chance to play PT, which was a teaser for the game, which ended up being the best thing to come out of the series since Silent Hill 2. And apparently, Hideo Junji, King of Horror manga, was going to be working with Kojima and Del Toro on Silent Hills. So to say this game was in good hands would be a really big fucking understatement. But of course, once again, Konami shot themselves in the foot by canceling the project and ending their partnership with Kojima, who was the creator of the Metal Gear franchise and also the last thing Konami had. And honestly, after playing Silent Hill 2 and learning about the series and playing the other games made by Team Silent, it fills me with so much anger towards Konami, especially since they aren't doing shit with the series. And unfortunately, even though we're living in a decade where every company is remaking everything, Konami has pretty much given up on making console games. They spent the last few years investing their time and money into the mobile game market. And with all the dumb shit Konami has been doing since they fired Team Silent, I honestly don't see a redemption story coming from them. But hopefully I'm wrong because I really want to experience new fears. I lived in California my whole life, and I don't know who the fuck came up with the slogan Sunny California, but they're fucking lying, because it's mostly depressing and cloudy and fog isn't really rare here either. But for the first time I was driving up the hills in California, and going up there was really thick fog. And I was listening to Null Moon in my car. This was also not even a couple days after first playing Silent Hill 2, and that was without a doubt the most unsettled and creeped out I've ever been. And funny enough, the first day I played the game, it was raining, which is really fucking rare in LA. But rarely does my fear in media translate into my real life. A good amount of horror movies are pretty over the top, so I typically don't see ghosts or serial killers in my life. But fog and rain or just cloudy weather now makes me really uneasy, which is the exact kind of effect I want media to leave off on me. And it bums me the fuck out that I'll probably never get a true sequel or remake to Silent Hill. But I'm really excited for Kojima's new game, Death Stranding. He's also making a horror game with Del Toro unrelated to Silent Hill, which I'm also really looking forward to. But I don't think I'll ever get over the thought of what could have been with Silent Hills, and the power Konami holds and could easily transfer to Kojima, or even better, what's left of Team Silent.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did.